All right, so um, tonight we're going to be diving into a topic that I'm sure a lot of you have experienced, all-nighters.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be using this great article called "What Staying Up All Night Does to Your Brain." And whether you're a student cramming for a test or just curious about what happens when we deprive ourselves of sleep,
Yeah.
this is going to be a really fascinating deep dive.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about, that groggy feeling you get the next day.
Right.
We're going deep into the long-term consequences to your brain
Yes.
when you skip out on sleep.
It's so easy to think of sleep as just downtime.
Yeah.
But it's so much more dynamic than that.
Right.
And it's remarkable how many of us just kind of power through on caffeine and willpower thinking that we can just, push through.
Right.
But this article really reveals the complex ways in which our brains function on a biological level.
Yeah.
And why sacrificing sleep has these ripple effects that we might not even be aware of.
Yeah, we often hear about these circadian rhythms, but
Yeah.
can you break it down for, those who aren't familiar?
Yeah.
What actually happens in our brains when we disrupt that rhythm by pulling an all-nighter?
So think of your brain as having this incredible internal clock. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
Okay.
And as light fades each day, this SCN signals to our pineal gland to start releasing melatonin. That's the hormone that essentially tells our body it's time to wind down for the night.
Right.
It's like a natural dimmer switch.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're staying up all night, you're fighting against this natural melatonin surge.
It's like we're throwing a wrench in the gears.
You're throwing the whole system off balance, yeah.
Okay, so we're messing with that internal clock.
Right.
But then there's also this feeling of almost like sleep pressure.
Yes.
That builds up the longer we're awake.
Yes.
What's the science behind that?
So that feeling is caused by a molecule called adenosine.
Okay.
And you can imagine adenosine as this sleepiness gauge in your brain. As you go about your day, adenosine gradually accumulates.
Right.
The longer you're awake, the more adenosine builds up.
Right.
And the sleepier you feel.
Okay.
It's like a natural braking system designed to make sure that you actually get the rest you need.
So that's where caffeine comes in.
Exactly. Yeah.
That temporary savior for many all-nighter veterans.
Yeah, caffeine is like this clever imposter.
Right.
It blocks adenosine from binding to these receptors in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So you get that temporary boost of alertness.
Right.
But you're essentially just putting a Band-Aid on a much larger issue.
Right.
You're masking that underlying need for sleep.
So it's not actually giving us more energy. It's just making us tricking our brain into thinking that we're not tired.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm guessing that can kind of backfire when it comes to things like memory
Oh, absolutely.
and concentration.
Yeah. You see, when you're sleep deprived, the hippocampus, that's the part of our brain that's responsible for forming new memories.
Mm-hmm.
It can't function optimally.
Oh, okay.
It's like imagine a librarian struggling to organize this massive influx of books.
Okay.
And without adequate sleep, those new memories just get kind of lost in the stacks.
Right.
And it becomes much harder to actually access and retrieve that information later on.
So you might be able to cram for a test,
Exactly.
but you're not going to retain that information.
Yeah. Sleep is crucial for actually moving those short-term memories from the hippocampus into long-term storage in the neocortex.
Okay.
And to make matters worse, you might even experience what are called microsleeps.
Oh.
These are those brief involuntary lapses into sleep that can happen when you're exhausted.
Okay.
Like your brain just desperately trying to catch a power nap, even when you're trying to stay awake.
Right.
And needless to say, that can be incredibly dangerous, especially if you're driving or operating machinery.
Yeah, that's a good reason to avoid pulling an all-nighter.
Right.
But I've also heard that being sleep deprived can actually make you feel kind of euphoric.
Yeah.
At least for a while.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that?
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's a fascinating neurological explanation for that. When we're sleep deprived, our brain can release this surge of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure and reward.
So it's almost like it's trying to reward us for staying up, even though it's actually bad.
Right. Yeah, it's like a survival mechanism,
Okay.
short-term fix to keep us going.
Right.
But this dopamine rush can also lead to impulsive decisions.
Oh, okay.
And a skewed perception of risk, making us feel overly confident.
Yeah.
Even when we're really functioning at a subpar level.
Okay, so that explains why all those late night ideas might not sound so brilliant in the morning.
Exactly, yeah.
And speaking of feeling a little bit off,
Yeah,
what about the impact of sleep deprivation on our emotions?
right.
We've all been there kind of snapping at someone after a rough night.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is there actually like a scientific reason behind that?
It's not just anecdotal, you know?
Yeah.
Sleep deprivation really significantly impacts our emotional regulation.
Okay.
The prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive control center that's responsible for rational thought and impulse control,
Okay.
becomes way less effective when we're sleep deprived.
So our ability to like think clearly and make good decisions is kind of out the window.
Exactly, yeah. At the same time, the amygdala, which is the part of our brain that processes emotions like fear and anger,
Okay.
that becomes more active.
Right.
So you have this combination, and it's like a recipe for emotional volatility.
Yeah.
We're much more likely to overreact to situations,
Right.
to experience like heightened anxiety and have difficulty managing stress.
So not only are we forgetful and impulsive, but we're also prone to emotional outbursts.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to really see why I try to avoid all-nighters as much as possible.
Right.
But this is really eye-opening to really understand like the science
Yes.
behind these feelings. What happens when this becomes chronic?
Right.
What are the long-term implications of, constantly skimping on sleep?
That's where it gets really concerning. The article points out the really well-established link between chronic sleep deprivation, so that's consistently getting, less than 7 hours of sleep,
Okay.
and a whole host of serious health problems.
Okay.
We're talking increased risk of developing heart disease, diabetes, weakened immunity, and even mental health issues like depression.
Wow. It's almost like this domino effect.
Yeah.
One area of our health suffers, and then all these others follow suit.
Right.
And it's really easy to think of sleep as something we can just sacrifice
Yeah.
when we're busy or when we have deadlines.
Exactly.
But this is painting a pretty serious picture
Yeah.
of the consequences.
And, the article actually gives this really interesting example. Studies have shown that college students who actually prioritize sleep and maintain consistent sleep schedules,
Right.
they actually tend to perform better academically,
Okay.
achieving higher GPAs
Wow.
compared to their sleep-deprived peers. It really underscores that sleep isn't a luxury. It's essential
Right.
for a healthy and productive life.
Yeah, that's a pretty compelling argument for putting sleep at the top of our priority list.
Right.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, the science, the immediate effects, the long-term risks, but what can we actually do about it?
Yeah.
What if you've already kind of developed these less than ideal sleep habits? Right. Are there ways to reset and improve our sleep hygiene?
Absolutely. The good news is our brains are remarkably adaptable. It's never too late to start making positive changes.
Okay.
One strategy that's really helpful for combating that adenosine buildup that
Right.
we were talking about earlier is incorporating strategic napping into your day.
Yeah.
Even like a short 20-minute nap can significantly reduce that sleep pressure.
So power naps aren't just a way to slag off.
Yes.
They're actually a brain-boosting tool.
Yeah. And another powerful tool is actually light exposure.
Okay.
Remember we talked about the SCN being sensitive to light?
Right?
Exposing yourself to bright light in the morning
Mm-hmm.
can help to reset your circadian rhythm
Okay.
and make it easier to actually fall asleep at night.
So it's like we're giving our internal clock that jump start.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And of course, creating like a relaxing bedtime routine, avoiding caffeine and heavy meals close to bedtime,
Right.
and making sure that your sleep environment is cool, dark, and quiet can make a world of difference.
So it sounds like small changes can make a big impact.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I love that we're not just focusing on the doom and gloom of sleep deprivation, but we're actually talking about actionable steps
Right.
that we can take to actually improve our sleep health.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. Understanding the science behind sleep can really motivate us to actually make choices that support our well-being.
Yeah, this has been such an insightful deep dive. I'm feeling pretty inspired to revamp my own sleep routine.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Remember, sleep is an investment in your present and your future self.
Yeah. So as we wrap up our deep dive into all-nighters and how they impact our brains, what would you say is the most impactful takeaway, something you hope our listeners kind of walk away with today?
I think for me, it's the realization that sleep isn't just about, feeling rested.
Right.
It's about actually giving our brains and our bodies
Right.
the chance to perform these really critical functions that we often take for granted.
Yeah, we've really uncovered the hidden cost
Yeah.
of sleep deprivation. And, it's easy to think about the benefits of an all-nighter.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to get ahead on work.
Right, exactly.
Or studying. But as we've seen in this deep dive, even just one night can really mess with those essential processes.
And the consequences of chronic sleep deprivation,
right.
they go way beyond just feeling groggy the next day.
Right.
We're talking about this increased risk of developing, serious health issues.
Right. Diabetes,
Heart disease, mental health conditions.
So it's a good reminder that, prioritizing sleep
Yes.
isn't selfish.
It's essential. Yeah.
It's really for our well-being.
It's an investment
Yeah.
in our long-term health and really our ability to function at our best.
Well, and we've also learned that our brains are pretty resilient.
Yes, very much so.
So even if you've pulled a few all-nighters in the past, you can start making these positive changes today to improve your sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
We talked about napping. We talked about light exposure. To kind of reset that circadian rhythm. It's good to know we actually have the power to change those habits.
Exactly.
Well, I think this has been a really, really insightful look
Yeah, it had.
at our brains and how sleep impacts our overall health. And with that, we'll leave you with this. Knowing what we know about sleep, how can we reframe our thinking about it?
Right.
Is it a luxury or is it actually a necessity for a healthy life? We encourage you to think about your own sleep habits and what changes you can make to prioritize sleep.
Yeah, it's so important.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, sleep well.